Yesterday, August the 6th, 2020, was the 55th anniversary of the passage of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. This groundbreaking legislation was signed into law by the Republican President Lyndon Baines Johnson. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 was the culmination of civil rights marches, sit-ins, and freedom rides. The aim of the legislation was to prohibit racial discrimination in voting by enforcing the 14th Amendment, which had been enacted on July 9th, 1868, as a response of Reconstruction in the United States, and the 15th Amendment, which was enacted in 1870. Essentially, the Voting Rights Act made it illegal to impose restrictions on access to voting. Thereafter, in 25-year increments, the first being Ronald Reagan, when he signed an extension for a 25-year period, and then George W. Bush also extended the Voting Rights Act for an additional 25 years. Which leads me to what my aim is, or what my intent is today, by providing a background, sort of a bird's eye overview of civil rights in the United States. The enactment of the Voting Rights Act of 1965 was the direct result of what's known in American history as Bloody Sunday, which took place on March 7th, 1965, in which John Robert Lewis and others were marching from Montgomery to Selma. As they were approaching the Edmund Pettis Bridge, and just for those who are unaware, the Edmund Pettis Bridge is named for a former Ku Klux Klan leader as well. He was a Confederate general. They were met by state troopers who, in full view of TV cameras, were beaten, bludgeoned, which is why this is known as Bloody Sunday. So subsequently, what happened is, a few weeks later, under the leadership of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., more people again assembled and successfully were able to navigate their way across the Edmund Pettis Bridge. This leads me to recent events where on July 17th, 2020, we lost two giants of the civil rights movement, Congressman John Lewis and Cordy Tindall Vivian. In the United States, we were able to, over a couple of days, witness the going home ceremony of Congressman John Lewis. As an African American, it was very poignant as well historical. In today's climate, regrettably, what is happening is voter suppression is taking place in ways our ancestors could not have foreseen. This year, in November, we go to the polls to decide whether to provide another 4 years for our current president, Donald Trump, or whether we're going to elect Joe Biden. So it's important for those who have no sense of civil rights and the indignities that African Americans, people of color, have endured to get to this point. Most people are familiar with the heroes and the sheroes of the civil rights movement, like Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King Jr. Some may or may not be familiar with John Lewis. They may or may not be familiar with names like Cordy Tyndall, Vivian, Andrew Young, and the like. So what I'm going to do is I am in fact going to shout out the names of various organizations and names that throughout African American history, which of course is in fact American history, all of these people have engaged in action which have propelled us as a people and a nation forward to where we are now. And so it's important to understand where we've been in order to appreciate where we need to go. So at this time, I would just like to, as a backdrop, share the Oxford Dictionary definition of paternalism, which is the policy or practice on the part of people in authority of restricting the freedom and responsibilities of those subordinate to or otherwise dependent on them in their supposed interest. So in American history, there are 7 men who are commonly referred to as our founding fathers. They are Benjamin Franklin, Alexander Hamilton, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, George Washington, John Adams, and James Monroe. Which brings me to another event, which was on July 3rd of this year. For those who were not able to see the Broadway play Hamilton, it was streamed live on Disney Plus. And I would highly recommend watching Hamilton. True, certain creative licenses were taken in the production of the story. However, it is, or what it does is it shares history from the point of view of those who at that time had no point of view. So essentially, it's told from an immigrant or minority point of view. There are some historical inaccuracies, but Hamilton had the effect in the United States of creating this movement where people were suddenly interested in learning about history. Imagine that. So for the younger generation who had no clue about essentially how the United States came into being, and I have in a prior podcast addressed that, it was like the cracking open of a door and light being shed in a contemporary fashion. for them to relate to, understand, and appreciate our history. So essentially, the world as we know it is overwhelmingly comprised of men who control every aspect of our lives. This has led to an imbalance of power, which is deeply ingrained in our culture. So much so that I don't even think people recognize or realize how ingrained it is. So generally, white men throughout the world who have power define what is fair and just. And we can certainly understand that it's not in their best interest to cede or share power with those of us, be you of color or women. So throughout history, world history, change has occurred when mass protests and or a shift in what is acceptable to the populace occurs. And this usually happens when popular culture comes into play, so we can't discount the importance of popular culture. And therefore, our history can be viewed through the lens of popular culture. In other words, ideas, beliefs, knowledge, and information manifested through art, music, literature, sports, and mass media. So recently in the United States, we see the intersection of culture, power, paternalism in controversies which have gripped most of our nation in the United States, in the controversies which have revolved around the National Football League, specifically Colin Kaepernick taking a knee, Confederate symbols and monuments, politics, the uptick in women becoming involved in politics, specifically minority women. We've also seen it in the Me Too movement. Another way that culture and politics in the past have intersected has been through songs of protest. So growing up, some of the songs that I would like to shout out as being songs of protest were War by Edwin Starr, Billie Holiday's Strange Fruit, Marvin Gaye's What's Going On, Sam Cooke's A Change Is Gonna Come, Marion McCabe's, and I'm going to spell it because my South African pronunciation is not at all good, Ndodemnyama, Gil Scott-Heron's The Revolution Will Not Be Televised, John Lennon's Imagine, Bruce Springsteen's Born in the USA, Bob Dylan, The Times They Are A-Changin', and we can add Eminem's The Storm. So now we're going to fast forward to more recent times, and we're going to specifically get back to the early 1960s. And during that time, we had such organizations as CORE, which stands for Congress of Racial Equality. We had SCLC, which is Southern Christian Leadership Conference. We had SNCC, or Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. So throughout history, some of the names, which I would ask that you conduct independent research, some of these names are going to be familiar and well known to you, and some are not going to be familiar. So of course we are all familiar with Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, Rosa Parks, W.E.B. Du Bois, Harriet Tubman, Sojourner Truth, Paul Robeson, Medgar Evers, Percy Julian, Booker T. Washington, Thurgood Marshall, A. Philip Randolph, James Meredith, Reverend Ralph Abernathy, Reverend Al Sharpton, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, Bobby Seale, Dred Scott, Dick Gregory, Nina Simone, Huey Newton, Hiram Revels, Marcus Garvey, Barbara Jordan, Stokely Carmichael, Harry Belafonte, John F. Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, Frederick Douglass, Ruby Bridges, James Farmer, Fela Kuti, Nelson Mandela, Richard Allen, Whitney Young Jr., Andrew Young, Denmark Vesey, Bayard Rustin, the Black Panthers, Eldridge Cleaver, Amiri Baraka, Ralph Bunche, Shirley Chisholm, Amelia Boynton Robinson, James Weldon Johnson, Daisy Bates, Diane Nash, Julian Bond, Angela Davis, Dorothy Height, Roy Wilkins, Hosea Williams, Merle Evers Williams, Reverend Joseph Lowry, Reverend Jesse Jackson, Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth, Reverend James Lawson, Fannie Lou Hamer, Viola Gregg Luuzzo, Frank Smith Jr., Claudette Colvin, Pauley Murray, Charles Hamilton Houston, Dion Diamond, Joanne Robinson, Ella Baker. Of course, I've mentioned the name of John Robert Lewis and Cordy Tyndall Vivian as well. Again, this list is not an exhaustive list, but these are indeed some of the persons who, throughout the course of history, have been instrumental in getting us where we are currently. So, I just want to take a moment and share with you the March on Washington. So the March on Washington occurred on August 28th, 1963. And at that time, John Lewis was the youngest person ever to speak. And so I'm going to share with you his speech. It begins, "We march today for jobs and freedom, but we have nothing to be proud of. For hundreds and thousands of our brothers are not here, for they are receiving starvation wages or no wages at all. While we stand here, there are sharecroppers in the Delta of Mississippi who are out in the fields working for less than $3 a day, 12 hours a day. While we stand here, there are students in jail on trumped-up charges. Our brother James Farmer, along with many others, is also in jail. We come here today with a great sense of misgiving. It is true that we support the administration's civil rights bill. We support it with great reservations, however. Unless Title III is put in this bill, there is nothing to protect the young children and old women who must face police dogs and fire hoses in the South while they engage in peaceful demonstrations. In its present form, this bill will not protect the citizens of Danville, Virginia, who must live in constant fear of a police state. It will not protect the hundreds and thousands of people that have been arrested on trumped charges. What about the 3 young men, SNCC field secretaries and Americus Georges, who face the death penalty for engaging in peaceful protest? As it stands now, the voting section of this bill will not help the thousands of black people who want to vote, It will not help the citizens of Mississippi, of Alabama, and Georgia who are qualified to vote but lack a sixth grade education. One man, one vote is the African cry. It is ours too. It must be ours. We must have legislation that will protect the Mississippi sharecropper who was put off his farm because he dares to register to vote. We need a bill that will provide for the homeless and starving people of this nation. We need a bill that will ensure the equality of a maid who earns $5 a week in a home of a family whose total income is $100,000 a year. We must have a good FEPC bill. My friends, let us not forget that we are involved in a serious social revolution. By and large, American politics is dominated by politicians who build their careers on immoral compromises and ally themselves with open forms of political, economic, and social exploitation. There are exceptions, of course. We salute those. But what political leader can stand up and say, my party is the party of principles? For the party of Kennedy is also the party of Eastland. The party of Javits is also the party of Goldwater. Where is our party? Where is the political party that will make it unnecessary to march on Washington? Where is the political party that will make it unnecessary to march in the streets of Birmingham? Where is the political party that will protect the citizens of Albany, Georgia? Do you know that in Albany, Georgia, 9 of our leaders have been indicted, not by the Dixiecrats, but by the federal government for peaceful protests? But what did the federal government do when Albany's deputy sheriff beat attorney C.B. King and left him half dead? What did the federal government do when local police officials kicked and assaulted the pregnant wife of Slater King and she lost her baby? To those who have said, be patient and wait, we have long said that we cannot be patient. We do not want our freedom gradually, but we want to be free now. We are tired. We are tired of being beaten by policemen. We are tired of seeing our people locked up in jail over and over again, and then you holler, be patient. How long can we be patient? We want our freedom and we want it now. We do not want to go to jail, but we will go to jail if this is the price we must pay for love, brotherhood, and true peace. I appeal to all of you to get into this great revolution that is sweeping this nation. Get in and stay in the streets of every city, every village, and hamlet of this nation until true freedom comes, until the revolution of 1776 is complete. We must get in this revolution and complete the revolution. For in the Delta in Mississippi, in Southwest Georgia, in the Black Belt of Alabama, in Harlem, in Chicago, Detroit, Philadelphia, and all over this nation, the black masses are on the march for jobs and freedom. They're talking about slow down and stop. We will not stop. All of the forces of Eastland, Barnett, Wallace, and Thurman will not stop this revolution. If we do not get meaningful legislation out of this Congress, the time will come when we will not confine our marching to Washington. We will march through the South, through the streets of Jackson, through the streets of Danville, through the streets of Cambridge, through the streets of Birmingham. But we will march with the spirit of love and with the spirit of dignity that we have shown here today. By the force of our demands, our determination, and our numbers, we shall splinter the segregated South into 1,000 pieces and put them together in the image of God and democracy. We must say, wake up, America, wake up, for we cannot and we will not and cannot be patient. So, this speech was written by John Lewis in 1963. And we know, as a result of recent events in the United States and throughout the world, that yes, indeed, people have taken to the street. people are indeed protesting and fighting for equality based upon the promise of the Declaration of Independence and the U.S. Constitution. Again, in the United States, we are entering a time, a very troubling time, where states have acted various laws which have resulted in the suppression of the right to vote. Specifically, I would like to call your attention to the Supreme Court case Shelby County versus Holder, which was decided on February 27th, 2013. So as a result of that case, voters who allege discrimination now bear the burden of proving that they are indeed being disenfranchised. In a 5-4 vote, the Supreme Court struck down a formula at the heart of the Voting Rights Act, the landmark 1965 law that required certain states and localities with a history of discrimination against minority voters to get changes cleared by the federal government before they went into effect. So I am not going to read all that this court case held. However, I would recommend that you research some of the effects of what has happened since the Supreme Court case is between 2012 and 2018. There were 1,688 polling place closures in states that previously had been covered by Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act. 214 of those closures were in the state of Georgia, a state again previously covered by the Voting Rights Act. Voter ID laws. Voter ID laws have long sought to disenfranchise people of color in marginalized communities by requiring them to have identification. In most marginalized communities, people of color are less likely to have the types of IDs that states have required for them to vote. Proof of citizenship. There are laws that now require residents to show proof of U.S. citizenship in local and state elections. These are just a few of the ways that efforts have been made to disenfranchise people of color. More recently, we have efforts to prohibit people from engaging in mail-in ballots, as well as efforts to privatize the U.S. Postal Service, which primarily is the vehicle by which these ballots are indeed delivered to the respective secretaries of states. So, all of this to say that we the people, we have to do our part. We have to be vigilant. We have to keep our eyes open. We have to be informed. We have to, by any means necessary, educate ourselves. Again, in an interesting twist, we have a celebrity who is apparently being bankrolled by the Republicans, Kanye West, who is in certain key states in the United States. His name is being placed on the ballot as a candidate for the office of President of the United States. It appears that in a last gasp effort to hang on to power, that Republicans will seemingly do anything and everything to try to hold on to power, which is why it is vitally important, again, as I've said, for us to, with open eyes, hearts, and minds, do what we need to do to ensure that everyone who wants to vote can, without fear of reprisal or suppression, cast their vote. The legacy of John Lewis, which is one of service to and in service of democracy and the right and freedom to cast your vote, is well documented in a documentary I would highly recommend that you see called Good Trouble. It's an excellent overview of his life, and on the day that he was buried, the New York Times published an opinion piece that he had written and asked that it be published on the day that he was laid to rest. I am going to read to you that opinion piece. It's entitled, John Lewis. Together you can redeem the soul of our nation. Though I may not be here with you, I urge you to answer the highest calling of your heart and stand up for what you truly believe. This appeared in the New York Times on July 30th, 2020. While my time here has now come to an end, I want you to know that in the last days and hours of my life, you inspired me. You filled me with hope about the next chapter of the great American story when you used your power to make a difference in our society. Millions of people, motivated simply by human compassion, laid down the burdens of division. Around the country and the world, you set aside race, class, age, language, and nationality to demand respect for human dignity. That is why I had to visit Black Lives Matter Plaza in Washington, though I was admitted to the hospital the following day. I just had to see and feel it for myself, that after many years of silent witness, the truth is still marching on. Emmett Till was my George Floyd. He was my Rayshard Brooks, Sandra Bland, and Breonna Taylor. He was 14 when he was killed, and I was only 15 years old at the time. I will never ever forget the moment when it became so clear that he could easily have been me. In those days, fear constrained us like an imaginary prison, and troubling thoughts of potential brutality committed for no understandable reason were the bars. Though I was surrounded by two loving parents, plenty of brothers, sisters, and cousins, their love could not protect me from the unholy oppression waiting just outside that family circle. Unchecked, unrestrained violence and government-sanctioned terror had the power to turn a simple stroll to the store for some Skittles or an innocent morning jog down a lonesome country road into a nightmare. If we are to survive as one unified nation, we must discover what so readily takes root in our hearts that could rob Mother Emanuel Church in South Carolina of her brightest and best. Shoot unwitting concert goers in Las Vegas and choke to death the hopes and dreams of a gifted violinist like Elijah McClain. Like so many young people today, I was searching for a way out, or some might say a way in. And then I heard the voice of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. on an old radio. He was talking about the philosophy and discipline of nonviolence. He said we are all complicit when we tolerate injustice. He said it is not enough to say it will get better by and by. He said each of us has a moral obligation to stand up, and speak out. When you see something that is not right, you must say something. You must do something. Democracy is not a state. It is an act. And each generation must do its part to help build what we call the beloved community, a nation and world society at peace with itself. Ordinary people with extraordinary vision can redeem the soul of America by getting in what I call good trouble, necessary trouble. Voting and participating in the democratic process are key. The vote is the most powerful nonviolent change agent you have in a democratic society. You must use it because it is not guaranteed. You can lose it. You must also study and learn the lessons of history because humanity has been involved in this soul-wrenching existential struggle for a very long time. People on every continent have stood in your shoes through decades and centuries before you. The truth does not change, and that is why the answers worked out long ago can help you find solutions to the challenges of our time. Continue to build union between movements stretching across the globe because we must put away our willingness to profit from the exploitation of others. Though I may not be here with you, I urge you to answer the highest calling of your heart and stand up for what you truly believe in. In my life, I had done all I can to demonstrate that the way of peace, the way of love and nonviolence is the more excellent way. Now it is your turn to let freedom ring. When historians pick up their pens to write the story of the 21st century, let them say that it was your generation who laid down the heavy burdens of hate at last, and that peace finally triumphed over violence, aggression, and war. So I say to you, walk with the wind, brothers and sisters, and let the spirit of peace and the power of everlasting love be your guide. I can say it no better than how John Lewis has said what our charge is moving forward. I would implore you to look into your heart and take the necessary steps to do what you need to do to let freedom ring. Today is the 1 year anniversary of me launching my podcast, Ancestral Muses. I wanted to express my gratitude to all of those who have supported me in this endeavor by listening, getting the word out. And so, as we know, 2020 has been one for the books. Throughout the world, we've been on what I like to call a timeout. We've been isolated from family, friends. We've been unable to travel. For a lot of us, the holidays were just another day because so many of us were advised not to go outside our bubbles that had been created during the COVID pandemic, to travel, to spend time with family and friends. As you know, I live in Florida, so I'm lucky that for practically 365 days out the year, we have sunshine, which is perhaps why Florida is called the Sunshine State. In the 30 plus years that I've lived here, culturally, things have improved, and Central Florida, which is where I live, is indeed a center of diversity, meaning that many people move here from different states, from different countries, and because we have warm weather for most of the year, we have different cultural festivals. So, one of the festivals that I regularly attend, or I've attended for the past 2 years, maybe 3, because I was unable to go north and be with my extended family, is Fusion Fest. And Fusion Fest is a smorgasbord of diversity. We have representatives from different countries who showcase their music, their art, their dance. And so last year, 2019, there was an Orlando group, Orlando Taiko Dojo, which did some Japanese drumming. Hopefully, I'll be able to incorporate that performance into the podcast, so stay tuned. So, because we have been limited in terms of our ability to travel, I thought I would share with you how I've been able to travel essentially without leaving the comfort of my home. So, this story begins with my friend Sophie, who is French. And of course, you know, my stories, some of them tend to have an international flair, so you won't be disappointed. So we, on, I think it was November 20th, went to Renninger's, which is a huge antique outdoor flea market. And while we were there, we ran into friends of hers who are regulars there. They sell items. That would be Victor and Milana, who are from Russia. So I had gotten there earlier, and as I was trying to find Sophie, I was wandering about and I connected with some brothers who were there representing Africa. One was, I think, from Ghana. The other one might have been from Senegal. But anyway, we had a conversation because on that particular day, I was wearing one of my Ghanaian outfits, which is purple, which has an Adinkra symbol on it. And so I know I may be sharing things that you know nothing about, but part of me doing my podcast is hopefully to encourage people to want to go deeper, do a little bit of research. And so Adinkra symbols come from Ghana, and you spell that Adinkra. Adinkra. And so the particular Adinkra symbol that was on the outfit that I was wearing, which I had purchased from a friend of mine who was Ghanaian, who was living in Florida before she moved back to Ghana, is the symbol is called Ni Chin Chin. And you spell that Nkyinkin. And what it means is it refers to a person's ability to adapt and change in various circumstances. It speaks to the resilience and adaptability of a person's character. It's a symbol of toughness, adaptability, selfless devotion to service, and an ability to withstand hardship and difficulties. So, after wandering about, I finally found where Sophie was with Victor and Milana. So as I was looking at some of the things that they were selling, I happened to look and I saw this beautiful teacup, saucer, and a dessert plate. There were 3 of them, 3 teacups, 3 saucers, and 3 dessert plates. So that was clearly marked with a price, which I believe was $8. And I gave Milana the money. And then when I got home, I noticed on the bottom of the teacup, saucer, and dessert plate, it was stamped Noritake. A wreath with the M, hand painted, made in Japan, which of course, that intrigued me. Japan is in fact a country that one day I hope to travel to. 3 years ago, to celebrate my 60th birthday, I went to Bali, and I believe maybe 10 years ago with a friend of mine, Shalini, who is Indian, I got to go to India. So I came home and I went to eBay. And imagine my surprise when I was able to locate a teapot, a sugar bowl, and a creamer in the same design of the tea cup, saucer, and dessert plates that I had purchased at Renninger's. So the pattern is called Gold Encrusted Temple, and or I've seen it referred to as pagoda with bridge and scenery. Now, just a little bit of background information, because of course, there's always a story. So, Noritake, China grew out of a trading company established by the Morimura brothers in New York in 1876. At that time, the company imported chinaware, curios, paper lanterns, and other gift ideas. In 1904, the forerunner of the Noritake Company was established in the village of Noritake, a small suburb near Nagoya, Japan. The goal of the first factory was to create Western-style dinnerware for export. So that information was gleaned from the Noritake website. I can't claim that I made it up. I just went to the website and I just jotted down some notes. And so this pattern, known either as Gold Encrusted Temple or pagoda with bridge scenery, is a vintage Noritake design. Now, when I saw this on eBay, I sent a note to the seller and asked whether or not the price was negotiable because, after all, I am a mediator and an arbitrator. So I figured, why not? So she replied to me that she would get back to me, which she did. I also have a saying, and that saying is, there are no coincidences, only synchronicities. So as we communicated back and forth, I shared with her that I had always wanted to travel to Japan, but because of the pandemic, purchasing this teapot, the sugar bowl, and the creamer might be the closest that I would get to Japan in who knows how long. I also shared with her that my father had been in the military in the U.S. Army. Imagine my surprise when Chloe wrote back to me and said that the owner of the teapot, creamer, and sugar bowl, whose name is Betty, that her husband had been, I believe she said, in the Air Force. And he had been stationed in Japan, which is where he had purchased the Noritake gold encrusted temple and or pagoda with bridge and scenery, whichever names. I think they're kind of interchangeable. But what is interesting is that it's hand painted. It is absolutely gorgeous. Please Google it. So once I shared with her that my father had been in the military, and that it was my hope and desire one day to travel to Japan, the deal was done. And so they agreed to sell me those items at a slight discount, for which I was grateful. And I have, in fact, been corresponding with them since that time. In fact, I shared with Chloe that I was going to, on the anniversary, December 8th, which is today, of my podcast, that I was going to do an episode where the title is yet to be decided on, but we're going to take a trip essentially through Japan based on me purchasing this very beautiful, initially teacup, saucer, dessert plates, and then being able to expand it to include the teapot, sugar bowl, and creamer. So what I learned when I was researching more information about this particular vintage design is that Noritake has been a fixture in American military bases. Who knew? Who knew that? I didn't know that. So that's something that I discovered. So a few facts about Japan. Japan is known for its traditional arts, including tea ceremonies, calligraphy, and floral or flower arrangements known as ikebana. Since I've purchased the teapot, the creamer, and the sugar bowl, just this past weekend, when Sophie and Magdalena came to my home to help me decorate for Christmas, we were able to use the set for the first time. In honor of the occasion, while I didn't have Japanese tea, I purchased Chinese white tea. And we gathered around and we were appreciative of the fact that the teapot, the creamer, and the sugar bowl had been in the possession of someone who truly cared for and loved those items. And it was and is my honor to now be the recipient of the items. And I hope that that Betty knows that I will be a good custodian for them. I appreciate her generosity in entrusting what must have been difficult for her to part with a gift that had been given to her by her late husband when he was stationed in Japan. Just a few more tidbits. The watermark, which is the wreath stamped in red with M, which stands for the Morimura brothers, was used or stamped on Noritake china during the years from 1914 through about 1940. And so, in closing, because I just wanted to share a short story with you, I want to thank all of my listeners. I hope in the next couple of days, I had thought about doing an episode where I kind of pulled together what occurred in our election. But as we know, we're still in a state of fluidity. But once it is indeed final, I will do an episode where I will kind of put all those pieces together. I welcome any comments or suggestions you, the listener, might have. And again, I do want to express my appreciation for your loyalty in listening to me. Thank you, and I hope everyone has a remainder of 2020 will be a time of continued reflection for all of us. Know that as we enter into 2021, hopefully you've taken the time to decide who you want to be in 2021, what changes you want to bring into your life, how you can become a better version of yourself, how during this holiday season we can reach out to those and check in on those who are feeling disconnected, discombobulated. And remember, we all are in this together. We are all connected. Namaste.